Welcome back to the Facts Not Fiction podcast, where every Wednesday we uncover the untold stories behind history's most fascinating cultural journeys. In our last episode, we explored how Mahjong spread from China to Japan, adapting, evolving, and becoming a reflection of post-war resilience and balance. But today, we're crossing the Pacific. Because in the Roaring 1920s, Mahjong didn't just arrive in America, it exploded. It became a craze, a social obsession, and a symbol of exotic glamour. From Manhattan high-rises to Hollywood parties, everyone wanted to play this mysterious Oriental game. Yet behind the champagne and silk, Mahjong's American story was shaped by marketing geniuses, cultural misunderstandings, and a touch of East meets West magic. This is the story of Mahjong in 1920s America, how a century-old Chinese pastime became the Jazz Age's most fashionable phenomenon. So, grab your seat, shuffle the tiles, and let's deal into the golden age of Mahjong. When Mahjong reached the United States in the early 1920s, it arrived not as a quiet pastime, but as a dazzling symbol of mystery and glamour. Americans were fascinated by the East, and Mahjong became the newest exotic obsessions, something that promised sophistication wrapped in foreign charm. Imported by traders and travelers, Mahjong sets began appearing in New York's department stores, often packaged with ornate Chinese art and delicate instruction booklets. The aesthetic alone drew attention. Ivory-like tiles, bamboo racks, and silk-lined boxes whispered stories of faraway lands. But this wasn't just a game, it was a fashion statement. The Jazz Age was a time of reinvention, and Mahjong fit perfectly into that rhythm of curiosity and rebellion. It gave people something to talk about, something to learn, and something to show off. Women's magazines declared Mahjong the must-have entertainment for the modern home. Flappers hosted Mahjong nights where laughter, jazz, and cigarette smoke filled the air. For many, it became part of the social fabric like cocktails or dancing. Part of Mahjong's American success came from clever marketing. Retailers like Abercrombie & Fitch saw potential and began importing thousands of sets from Shanghai. They advertised Mahjong as the game of the century, selling millions within a few years. The craze spread so fast that newspapers began calling it a Mahjong epidemic. Every upper-class living room had a table. Every fashionable woman owned her personal set, and every party seemed to include at least one round of play. But something interesting happened during this cultural wave. The game transformed. Americans adapted rules to suit their style, creating simpler, faster versions that emphasized excitement over strategy. Mahjong was reinterpreted through Western energy. In the Roaring 1920s, people sought escape from war memories, from economic shifts, from changing gender roles. Mahjong offered a small universe where luck and wit mixed freely, creating moments of balance amid the chaos of modern life. Its appeal wasn't just about gameplay, it was about identity. Playing Mahjong made people feel cosmopolitan, as though they were part of something global, something refined. It gave Americans a taste of the Orient, as they romantically imagined it. Ironically, few Americans truly understood the original Chinese rules. But that didn't matter. Mahjong's beauty lay in its flexibility, the same way jazz evolved from strict notes into free expression. Mahjong in America became jazz with tiles. Social clubs, hotels, and cafes hosted Mahjong tournaments. Newspapers printed weekly columns on how to play. And in 1923, even Hollywood joined in. Film stars were photographed casually playing Mahjong between scenes. In that sense, Mahjong became both a game and a mirror reflecting America's fascination with reinvention. It wasn't about mastering ancient rules. It was about transforming tradition into something thrilling and new. The media called it the Mahjong craze, and it reached every corner of society. From elite New Yorkers to small-town families, everyone wanted to be part of the trend. Stores couldn't keep up with demand for tiles and tables. Behind this craze, though, was a deeper story of cultural exchange. American fascination with China was complex, a mix of admiration and misunderstanding. Mahjong represented a bridge, even if that bridge was sometimes built on fantasy. Interestingly, Chinese immigrants in America viewed Mahjong differently. For them, it wasn't exotic or trendy, it was home. It carried the sound of family gatherings, the rhythm of conversation, and a sense of belonging in a foreign land. So while wealthy Americans played Mahjong for novelty, Chinese families played it for nostalgia. The same game, two worlds, two meanings. This dual identity would shape how Mahjong evolved in the West for decades to come. By 1924, the Mahjong craze had reached its peak. Over 40 million sets had been sold, and etiquette guides even appeared, teaching players how to act at Mahjong parties. Everything from clothing suggestions to how to shuffle tiles politely. Publishers printed countless rulebooks, each claiming to hold the true version of Mahjong. Yet, no two were the same. The game became fluid, reinvented in every household, reshaped by imagination more than authenticity. Still, that was the beauty of it. Mahjong had done something few cultural imports could. It had rooted itself in American life while keeping its soul intact. Beneath the noise and marketing, the heart of Mahjong connection remained unchanged. As the 1920s roared on, Mahjong became a symbol of joy, rebellion, and cultural curiosity. It wasn't just a game played on tables, it was a moment in history, where East met West in laughter, learning, and shared fascination. By the mid-1920s, Mahjong had swept across the United States like wildfire, from smoky parlors in New York to sunny patios in California. Everyone wanted a set, everyone wanted to play. Newspapers called it the game of the year. Department stores couldn't keep Mahjong sets on their shelves. It wasn't just a pastime, it was a social event. The craze started largely thanks to an American businessman named Joseph P. Babcock, who first discovered Mahjong while living in Shanghai. Fascinated by the game's rhythm and mystery, Babcock brought it home to the US and simplified its complex rules so that Americans could learn it easily. He even trademarked his version as Mahjong, adding the double G for flair, a clever marketing move that helped make the game sound exotic and fun. Soon, Babcock's red box Mahjong sets were everywhere. A sleek, stylish box with bamboo tiles, rulebooks, and even instruction cards. Hollywood stars, debutantes, and even politicians were photographed playing Mahjong. It was the ultimate symbol of sophistication. But what truly made Mahjong explode in popularity was how it blended East and West, the mystery of Chinese art with the accessibility of Western play. It fit perfectly into the Jazz Age, an era obsessed with fashion, glamour, and global curiosity. Parties themed around Mahjong became common, with rooms decorated in Chinese motifs, lanterns, and silk robes. Magazines published Mahjong etiquette guides, how to host, what snacks to serve, even what music to play in the background. One article from Ladies' Home Journal in 1924 called Mahjong the Smart Woman's Bridge. Mahjong became a fashionable alternative to bridge parties, less competitive, more charming, and dripping with cultural novelty. Even toy companies like Parker Brothers joined the wave, releasing their own versions of Mahjong sets to meet the insatiable demand. However, the game's booming popularity also led to confusion. Dozens of rule variations appeared, each claiming to be the real Mahjong. Some followed Babcock's simplified Western rules. Others tried to preserve traditional Chinese scoring. Mahjong clubs emerged in cities across America, where enthusiasts debated which version was authentic. Yet despite the chaos, one thing was clear: Mahjong had become a movement. It was no longer just a game. It was a symbol of cultural fascination. Chinese immigrants in Chinatowns across the US watched the craze with mixed feelings, proud that their heritage was celebrated, but wary of how it was commercialized. Still, Mahjong helped bridge understanding. It gave Americans a glimpse into Chinese artistry and symbolism, sparking curiosity about a culture that felt both distant and alluring. As Mahjong fever reached every corner of America, a new kind of social connection began to form. The game wasn't just played, it was performed. People proudly displayed their imported sets and boasted about understanding Chinese symbols they barely knew. It became a cultural badge of sophistication in the roaring 1920s. In elegant living rooms and bustling hotel lounges, Mahjong parties replaced bridge nights. The clicking of tiles, the rustle of silk gowns, and jazz music in the background turned it into a scene of modern glamour. Mahjong had become both entertainment and status symbol. Magazines of the time couldn't get enough. They ran colorful features on how to host the perfect Mahjong party, complete with themed decorations, dragon motifs, and Mandarin-inspired menus. It was exoticism wrapped in etiquette, Western fantasy of the East. Women especially found empowerment through Mahjong. In an era when many were still confined by social roles, the game offered a reason to gather, socialize, and think strategically. It was both playful and intellectual, bridging gender norms, subtly, yet powerfully. Interestingly, it was also one of the few games where women were seen as equals to men. Magazines praised clever lady players who outwitted their male opponents, a quiet symbol of the growing independence movement of the decade. The commercialization of Mahjong reached astonishing heights. Retailers sold themed clothing, jewelry, and even perfume. The word Mahjong appeared on everything from cigarette boxes to cocktail recipes. It wasn't just a pastime anymore, it was a full-blown trend. Yet, beneath the glitz, a question lingered. Did Americans truly understand Mahjong, or were they simply fascinated by the idea of China? For many, it was the latter, a stylized fantasy rather than a genuine appreciation of the game's roots. This fascination often mixed admiration with stereotype. Advertisements used caricatures of Chinese imagery, fans, dragons, pagodas, creating a romanticized yet inaccurate version of the culture behind the tiles. Still, even with this cultural distortion, Mahjong opened small doors of awareness. People began reading about Chinese traditions, learning phrases, and showing curiosity about Asia, something rare in mainstream America of that time. As the game spread westward, social clubs emerged in cities like Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Mahjong tournaments filled hotel ballrooms, where hundreds competed for prizes, laughter, and a sense of being part of something international. One notable club, the National Mahjong League, later formed to standardize the game, addressing the growing confusion about the rules. Their mission was simple: create unity among American players, while keeping a respectful nod to the game's origins. The league's rulebook, first published years later, was built on Babcock's simplified version, but with uniquely American twists, new hands, new scoring, and even jokers. It was Mahjong reborn in a Western rhythm. The 1920s craze also reflected America's booming consumer culture. The middle class had money, free time, and a hunger for global novelty. Mahjong fit perfectly. It was elegant, foreign, and slightly mysterious, everything the Jazz Age craved. For many Americans, owning a Mahjong set was like owning a piece of the world. Each tile seemed to whisper stories from distant Shanghai, echoing adventure and sophistication. It satisfied both curiosity and vanity. Hollywood soon joined the movement. Celebrities posed with Mahjong tables in magazines, reinforcing its glamour. Some films even featured Mahjong scenes as shorthand for worldly elegance. It became the cinematic code for culture and charm. But as quickly as it rose, the craze began to fade toward the end of the decade. By 1929, new trends, especially the growing obsession with radio and sports, started to pull attention away. Mahjong's golden moment was dimming. Then came the Great Depression. With financial hardship spreading, the once luxurious Mahjong parties felt out of place. Sets gathered dust, and enthusiasm waned, as people focused on survival rather than sophistication. Yet Mahjong didn't vanish entirely. It quietly retreated into smaller communities, especially among Jewish American women, who embraced it as a social ritual in the 1930s and beyond. They kept the tradition alive through weekly games and close friendship circles. These gatherings became more than games. They were moments of connection, storytelling, and solidarity. Mahjong evolved from a status symbol to a symbol of community, resilience, and belonging. Over time, the American version of Mahjong diverged significantly from its Chinese ancestor. The tiles looked similar, but the spirit had changed, had adapted, survived, and found a new identity. While traditional Chinese Mahjong emphasized meditation and timing, American Mahjong became about strategy, luck, and sociability, a reflection of Western values, merging with Eastern roots. This hybridization was both beautiful and complex. It showed how culture could travel, transform, and still retain meaning, even when reshaped by new contexts and audiences. In many ways, Mahjong mirrored America itself, diverse, adaptable, and endlessly reinventing its identity while drawing inspiration from around the world. By the 1940s, Mahjong had solidified into a distinctly American pastime. Housewives played it on porches, friends gathered round card tables, and children learned the sound of shuffling tiles from their parents. This intergenerational transmission ensured Mahjong's survival long after the original craze faded. What began as a fad had become a tradition. Even today, vintage 1920s Mahjong sets are prized collectibles. Their bamboo craftsmanship and hand-painted symbols carry whispers of a time when the world first fell in love with the game from across the ocean. In retrospect, Mahjong's journey to 1920s America wasn't just about entertainment, it was about globalization before the term existed. It connected East and West through curiosity, trade, and the universal desire to play. The story also highlights the power of reinvention. Mahjong didn't lose its soul by traveling, yet gained new expressions, new meanings, and new life wherever it landed. And while purists might lament the Americanization of Mahjong, others see it as proof of the game's timeless adaptability. Few cultural artifacts have crossed so many borders and remained relevant for over a century. The Mahjong craze of the 1920s planted a seed that would blossom for generations. From New York rooftops to California patios, its echoes still linger in American culture, fashion, and memory. Every time a player arranges tiles into a winning hand, they unknowingly continue a story that began halfway across the world. That's the quiet beauty of Mahjong. It's never just a game. It's a conversation between cultures, a bridge between eras, and a timeless reminder that joy can travel farther than we imagine. In the end, Mahjong's journey through 1920s America reflects more than a historical moment. It's a mirror of human curiosity, adaptation, and shared fascination. Even a century later, the idea of Mahjong still carries that same air of mystery and sophistication that captivated the Jazz Age elite. The Mahjong tables of the past may be gone, but the legacy they built continues to inspire new generations of players worldwide. As we trace its history, we see how Mahjong constantly evolves like a cultural river, flowing across time, shaping and reshaping itself with every new hand played. Its ability to connect people across languages, classes, and continents is perhaps the most powerful part of its legacy. The 1920s American Mahjong story reminds us that even trends rooted in misunderstanding can lead to meaningful exchange if they evolve with respect and curiosity. Through the tiles, a dialogue was born, a conversation between the East that created and the West that adopted. Between preservation and transformation, that dialogue still continues today. In every coffee shop game in Tokyo, every family night in New York, and every online match bridging players across oceans. So as we close this chapter of Mahjong's American adventure, we remember how a simple set of tiles carried so much meaning, connecting hearts, homes, and histories. From Shanghai's harbor to American living rooms, Mahjong's voyage was not just physical, it was emotional, creative, and deeply human. And while its 1920s glamour may have faded, its influence remains a whisper of the Jazz Age, preserved in every shuffle and click. Today, when we hear that rhythmic sound of tiles, we're not just playing, we're remembering a century of stories carried in the weight of porcelain and bamboo. Let's detour from tiles to today's geopolitical stage, a spectacle where tariffs are tossed like dramatic tiles. Headlines love a sharp soundbite. Leaders deliver a line, cameras applaud, and suddenly a customs form feels like a plot twist. Behind the curtain, though, officials grind through legalese, exemptions, and fines, while markets recalibrate in sober spreadsheets. Trade spats often play like a badge of toughness. A tariff slapped down, a comeback tariff retorted. It makes great television. But the real world measures the echo: higher import bills, slower shipments, and suppliers rethinking contracts. Political gestures can reshape daily life subtly, and those small fractures sometimes add up into real consequences for families and small shops. There's an art to the rhetoric too. Short, sharp pronouncements get headlines, but they rarely map cleanly to customs codes. Policy needs annotators, definitions, and transition periods. Paperwork that lacks drama but keeps commerce moving. When politicians trade zingers, bureaucrats are left to translate them into tariff schedules and implementation plans. At ports, customs officers scan manifests while negotiators trade tweets. It's a strange duet. Diplomacy in op-eds, paired with dockside labor, checking boxes. A single tariff can ripple through supply chains, changing where parts are made, where phones are assembled, and how quickly shelves refill. Consumers notice last, but they feel it most, in price tags and availability. One amusing feature of modern trade disputes is the theatrical brinkmanship. Leaders announce measures as if slamming down a winning tile, while teams behind them hurriedly craft exemptions for domestic industries. The headline is decisive. The rulebook is messy. That dissonance is where practical governance gets tested, and where economists quietly wince. Sarcasm aside, tariffs do real economic work. They nudge incentives, protect some sectors, and heighten costs for others. A customs fee on an imported microchip can inflate production costs for unrelated goods. It's not just an abstract policy, it's a lever pulled on real factories, affecting payroll, investment, and long-term planning. Companies respond with pragmatic moves, adjust suppliers, relocate factories, or reclassify components. This is corporate agility, not heroism. The boardroom calculus becomes an improvisation. What tile to move next, so production doesn't stumble. Meanwhile, the public watches the theater, rarely seeing the logistical choreography that actually stabilizes supply. Press releases read like battle poetry. We will respond. They trumpet, as if sentences alone can shift containers across oceans. But trade rules require clarity, tariff sheets, legal exceptions, and transition windows. The gap between rhetoric and implementation sometimes makes policy feel like a magic trick, with officials quietly juggling technicalities to avoid market chaos. Casual consumers experience the fallout slowly, a higher price here, a delayed gadget there. It's unflashy but steady small inconveniences that, added together, reshape budgets. Political theater reels. The cost of a household appliance, or the timing of a holiday shipment, tells the quieter story of how trade decisions reach kitchen tables. Meanwhile, negotiators play an ancient diplomatic game, masked as modern spectacle. High-level bluster can be a useful tactic. It creates bargaining room. But if brinkmanship drags on, it turns into harmful rigidity. Eventually, someone needs to convene a room, set a table, and convert bravado into enforceable agreements that keep commerce humming. There's also the risk of tit-for-tat escalation. A response to a tariff can trigger another response, and soon both sides count losses. In game terms, retaliation can lock both players into decreasing returns. The smart move is not perpetual counterplay, but a measured strategy that recognizes mutual interoperability, outweighs short-lived points on a political scoreboard. Complicating everything is modern production. A single product can cross borders multiple times before completion. Tariffs on a single component can cascade into price changes across dozens of finished goods. Policymakers, who lean on simple narratives, risk several unintended consequences. Manufacturing doesn't read headlines. It reads invoices and delivery each. Journalists and commentators savor the drama, but not every scene is newsworthy. The painstaking work of customs harmonization, tariff classification, and regulatory alignment rarely trends on social feeds. Yet this is the stuff that keeps trade functional. The absence of flash does not mean the work is unimportant. It's the quiet plumbing of global exchange. In the end, trade policy is a pragmatic art. Political performances may sway public mood for a moment, but durable outcomes depend on rules, predictability, and cooperation. When negotiators step out of the spotlight, they must rebuild trust. That's tedious, unglamorous, and crucial. The real craftsmanship of international relations. So let's not romanticize the theater. The headline-grabbing moment will pass. The ledger lines and invoices persist. Citizens deserve clarity, transparent cost estimates, clear transition rules, and honest assessments of who benefits and who pays. Sarcasm reveals absurdity, but civic maturity demands accountability and long-term thinking. For businesses, the sensible play is resilience. Diversify suppliers, build buffers, and engage in pragmatic contingency planning. For policymakers, the task is to design trade architecture that reduces shocks. For citizens, the modest hope is that someday political showmanship yields to policy that actually keeps shelves stocked, workers paid, and economies humming. If satire helps us see the absurd leaders trading bold lines while clerks untangle the fine print, it also nudges us to expect better. Beyond the spectacle, there's a slow, steady process of negotiation, compromise, and technical work that enables trade to function. This is where durable progress lives, away from applause. So as we return to the gentle clack of tiles on screen, remember, geopolitical theatrics are entertaining, but the quiet engineering of trade is profound. It sustains livelihoods, nurtures industries, and fashions the everyday things we take for granted. Respect the spreadsheets. They hold the world together more reliably than. Alright, back to Mahjong's quieter lessons. The game teaches patience, strategy, and perspective. The world of trade teaches the same, only louder. Keep your wit calibrated, your curiosity alive, and your expectations rooted in the pragmatic work that follows every grand pronouncement. Next week, we'll continue our journey with episode 5. Mahjong as a social ritual in Chinese families, where we'll explore how the game returned home and evolved once again. We'll look at how Mahjong adapted after the cultural shifts of the mid-20th century, finding its place between nostalgia, competition, and digital rebirth. So if you've been enjoying this historical deep dive, make sure to follow and subscribe to Facts Not Fiction on YouTube for weekly episodes every Wednesday. You can also revisit the earlier parts of this journey. Episode 1, on the origins of Mahjong. Episode 2, on its rise during the Qing dynasty. And Episode 3, on its spread to Japan. Each episode unpacks another layer of Mahjong's incredible Legutia story that proves how games can shape culture and connect worlds. Remember to like, comment, and share your favorite Mahjong memory or fun fact. Your interaction helps this series reach more history lovers and puzzle fans around the world. Because Mahjong isn't just ancient history, it's a living tradition, echoing in every shuffle and every thoughtful pause before a winning tile. The journey continues, and so does our fascination with the game that transcends language, geography, and time. Thank you for joining this week's podcast of Vita Mahjong, the history behind the tiles, your guide through the game's fascinating cultural evolution. If you missed any episodes, you can find the full playlist in the description below, along with links to our other puzzle and history series. From the quiet strategy of Zen Word to the colorful patterns of Marble Match, every game tells a story, and we're here to uncover it. Subscribe now to stay tuned for next Wednesday's episode, another deep dive into Mahjong's ongoing legacy and its place in modern gaming culture. Until then, may your hands be lucky, your tiles aligned, and your curiosity endless. This is Facts, Not Fiction, where stories meet strategy. We'll see you next week, right here, as we continue the Mahjong Chronicles, exploring how the past shapes the games we love today. Thank you for listening, for learning, and for keeping this beautiful piece of cultural history alive through your interest and attention.